investors who have invested hundreds of millions of dollars just over the last couple of years. So we'll look forward to hearing more from them and their firsthand experience, both in dealing with the terrific investment climate that we've had, the regulatory improvements that we've seen over the last couple of years, the commitment of the administration to our workforce initiatives and ensuring that there's a pipeline of talent, that is, to ensure that they have the workforce that they need. But it really is incredible to see this commitment to expanding in the United States to access this ever-growing market. And without further ado, I just would like to introduce and have them introduce themselves and the companies. My name is Ian Steff, and I serve as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Manufacturing, and also serve as the Acting Assistant Secretary of Global Markets and head up the Foreign Commercial Service. And it all fits on a business card as well, so in the event that you want it, you can have it. But I would start with Mark. Why don't we, Mark, yes. Yeah, Mark, where are you? There you are, Mark. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Ian, for the introduction. So my name is Mark Ludwikowski. I head up our law firm's international trade practice. The law firm is called Clark Hill. I'm based here in Washington, D.C., and I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I actually started at the Department of Commerce 20 years ago in international trade administration, working on anti-dumping and countervailing duty cases, trade remedy cases, basically. And since then, I went into the private sector about 2000 and have been working with foreign companies that are affected by these cases, affected by the tariffs, and U.S. importers. So my goal, I guess, is to provide you with a little bit of a different perspective on how the trade policy has affected our clients, affected foreign companies, affected U.S. importers, and also individuals within those companies, how they view this. And I wouldn't call it necessarily a trade war, because it really depends on what perspective you're taking. Some may take it as a trade war that the president has started with China, with Mexico, Canada over NAFTA, with global partners over automobile tariffs that are proposed, aluminum, steel. Others may say that this is actually an overdue policy, that for years, for decades, other administrations have neglected the situation. The deficit has gotten out of control, and something needed to be done. So it really does depend on what perspective you say. And also, trade war is kind of a loaded term, because we may have our own casualties. It could be friendly fire. So it really depends on how you how you approach this. So I'll try to answer some key points, mainly what our clients' reactions have been, what can be done to help companies navigate this landscape, because it is constantly evolving. Basically, what tools are available to minimize or to mitigate and to continue doing business as usual, and maybe even grow through this process.
Thank you. Dilip.
Hello. First of all, I want to thank the Department of Commerce for giving me this opportunity to talk about the wonderful work that Mahindra has been doing here in this country. I'm Dilip Sundaram. I'm the president for Mahindra Group in the Americas. And we are about a $2.7 billion business here just in the US. And we got about 4,000 employees, American citizens and permanent residents. And in addition to that, we have a number of contract employees. So our total bench strength is about 7,000 people here in the US alone. So I think one of the reasons I think I'm sitting out here is probably because not only have I had the experience of having developed businesses in the US, I've invested in the US, but I think I have a comparative perspective on what it takes to build a business all over the world. I mean, whether you want to invest in Brazil or Slovakia or India or China, I think I do have a certain amount of perspective. But I think here we are here to talk about how we can be successful here in the U.S.
Thank you. Thank you, Dilip. We'll move on to Samir. Samir.
Hi, everybody. Samir Kapadia, COO with the Vogel Group. I'm here principally representing a number of companies that have invested billions of dollars in the U.S. Over the past year and a half. principally to talk about JSW Steel. I'm the chief advisor for JSW in terms of their investment here in the United States. And last year, going to share some wonderful stories about a $500 million investment in Baytown, Texas, and a $500 million investment in Mingo Junction, Ohio, in the steel industry. And those reasons were principally for the dynamic shifts we have in trade. Protectionism, as some would call it, has had a positive impact on encouraging investment in now protected markets, where imports are limited and where domestic suppliers now have the chance to sell on a level playing field. These are the opinions of many CEOs and chairmen of global companies, particularly from India, that are now coming into the United States in a big way. Frankly, even this year, right now, we're working on a $250 million new aluminum forging plant. And I'm very pleased to see the Secretary of Commerce from Kentucky, Mr. Vivek Sareen, in the audience. We've been visiting with him quite often about that potential investment. So trade is impacting investment in a big way, more than it has in the past. And there's a lot of positive stories about that. So I can certainly talk about that.
Great. Thank you, Samir. Darrell.
Darryl Corbett, JJ Richards. We're an Australian waste company. We're Australia's largest privately owned waste company, $1 billion in revenue in Australia. And after 87 years trading in that Australia-New Zealand market, the family that owned the business decided, let's have a crack in the US and see what we can do over there. So when you think of waste management, Republic Services, that's effectively who we are in the Australian market. We're a very diverse business, vertically integrated with landfills, your traditional MRFs and collection business, but we also diversify. We've got a couple of oil refineries where we take used engine oil and produce a base lube that's sold back to the oil producers. So there's a few $100 million invested in those refineries in Australia. We've also developed a biofuel, and our biggest customer, once that's established and up and running at the end of this year, early next year, will be the US Navy. So we've got a fair bit of interaction with the US now. We've also got another business that I'm bringing over here called Pulp Master, which is going to revolutionise the way food waste is handled and collected in the US market. So we've invested a fair bit to date, but there's a lot more investment going to happen in all over the country. We're in Florida and recently established a business in Texas. So we've hit the ground running and look forward to having this discussion today about investing in the US climate.
Thank you, Darrell. You know, looking back on the recent investments that you've made, which have amounted to billions of dollars over just the last year and a half, as Samir mentioned, can you just talk a little bit about what initially led to that investment, how and why you chose the state that you did, and what advice would you have for other states and economic developers in the audience? So these would be for companies that you're representing here today. Yeah, so we'll begin with you.
Well, actually, as a law firm, we personally would not be investing in the U.S., but our clients certainly have looked in this direction, and the trade policies have led to this focus. So many foreign companies have considered moving production here. The incentive may have been the tariffs, to be honest, and it just simply makes sense, and it is becoming more expensive for them to produce, for instance, in China, on different products. Even Mexico was not really a clear option at this point. So moving production into the U.S. Has been on their radar. Interestingly, some of the issues that they've encountered were finding the right labor force, and so the different states have different opportunities for them in that regard. But certainly we've seen an increase in that in attention to investing in the U.S. for our clients.
Sure. Dilip?
So I'm very proud to say that we are the first company to have invested in Detroit in the last 25 years. So we all know what Detroit went through, what Michigan has gone through over the last few years, but we decided we had confidence in Michigan. We really invested in Michigan because we saw the talent pool out there. And so we started off by setting up a technical center there, and the technical and research facility kind of morphed into manufacturing and an assembly plant. So we have 3 locations there, and we're looking for the 4th. So I think that is really something we have to say. Now, one of the reasons also is the fact that U.S. is the largest economy in the world. I mean, we cannot ignore that fact. And also, U.S. is one of the fastest growing economy in the world. So you have very few countries that can boast of higher growth rates than the U.S. And but then even then, I mean, U.S. is the largest economy. So unless you are really a player here, you know, if you really want to grow your company, if you really want to be called a global multinational, you need to be in the U.S. So it represented those kind of opportunities for us. Again, the skill set and the talent pool that we have in this country is unparalleled. So it was a no-brainer for us to come here, invest, and we chose Michigan again because for us, that focus of our investment was in automotive. Now, Mahindra is a federation of companies with a number of different businesses, but where we invested was in automotive, and so for us, Michigan made perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Samir, any comments on your experiences with the companies you're representing?
Yeah, so I think, look, you should never make an investment decision based upon politics. Don't do it. You'll end up in failure. You have to do it based upon a few things. First has got to be your business model. So if you're a manufacturer and you want to pursue making a new factory in the United States, you got to think, I'm going to be using a lot of electricity. Where can I find favorable utilities rates? Kentucky's the lowest in the country. You might think to yourself, I need access to roads, rivers, and railways if you're moving a lot of product. So where can you go? Ohio is fantastic. Then you got to think, I need cheap natural gas. Go to Texas. Now, these are business decisions when you're thinking about your cost of operations. Once you determine that, go meet these states. Go meet 5 of these, they call them economic development offices. Every state in the United States has an economic development office. Go to them, talk with them, they'll set up meetings with you, and they'll walk through all the reasons why you should be investing in their state. And they'll give these things called incentives. They'll give you cheap utility rates for 5 years. They'll give you property tax abatements. They'll give you property income tax rebates over 5 years. And there'll be like a competition to see who's giving you the best deal. And then once you isolate, okay, here's where I know my business operations are going to be the most sound, and then you know you're going to get the best deal from the government, then start and focus on operations. So it's a very systematic process. Of course, as to Dilip's point, this is the market. If you're not in the United States, then you're clearly missing on something. But the second point is the trade dialogue has encouraged people to give the U.S. another look because of the costs. So really it comes down to doing your business analysis, meeting the states, negotiating an incentive package, and starting a company. That's how I would advise you to start.
Thank you. Darrell, any comments on that front?
Yeah, well, this time 2 years ago, actually, I was doing our assessment of the US market, and I spent 7 weeks here and concluded actually here at SelectUSA. Now, out of that travel that I did, I identified Texas and Florida really as the key markets for our entry into the trash business. Those areas are booming. Both states are booming. And the area that we chose to go to, Orlando, is one of the fastest growing cities in the US. A lot of infrastructure work going on there at the moment. So what I look for is a lot of rubbish being generated around the country. So that market really stood out to us, and I basically met up with Enterprise Florida here and the Orlando Office of Economic Development, and they basically guided me through and convinced me that Florida was really key for our entry into the market. Our biggest competitors on a national level here are all headquartered in Texas. So it didn't make sense to us to actually go and kind of poke the bear and make sure that we went under the radar for as long as we could, and we were able to achieve that in Florida. So yeah, and now we're looking at, we manufacture all of our own bins in Australia. Our own trucks are manufactured in Australia. We manufacture the computers that go into the truck, the hardware and the software. So we're about to establish another business in Texas, and that'll manufacture all of that equipment in-house. So great market for us. Trash isn't going anywhere. There's a lot of recycling that has to happen. The Chinese issues with the trade bans and all of that have caused an issue for our industry in relation to recycling. Most of the recycling that was generated in the US used to be shipped across to China. China has shut the gate on that, so now that's going to force investment in the US market in relation to technology and being able to recycle those products in-house. So a lot of opportunity.
Well, thank you. We mentioned a little bit about the trade policies and just the ability of the administration to look at trade barriers as they exist in many markets around the world. One other factor is the investment climate here and the regulatory environment, and the administration's push on the corporate tax reform early on. I mean, we had not had a substantive change in the tax code for decades prior to the administration coming in and making significant improvements there to make the U.S. much more competitive in contrast to the international scene. Likewise, on the regulation front, the policy to eliminate 2 regulations for any one on the books. I think Commerce is now up to 22 to 24 regulations that have been eliminated for every one that's been created. So the deregulation trend is significant. And the last element that you also talked about was workforce. So as you look at all of those 4 factors, the trade, the investment climate, deregulation, and then the workforce, maybe just how do you weigh those individually for your companies? And I'm sure it varies a little bit. Maybe we'll start, with Mark.
So I think from our clients' perspective, the ones that are looking to relocate to the U.S. or even U.S. companies that maybe had facilities overseas and are looking to bring them back here, certainly workforce has been an issue that they look at very closely. To give you an example, we have a client that makes cabinets, and they make cabinets in China. There has been an anti-dumping duty case on cabinets recently. They have been looking to bring production back to the U.S. for some time, and this was an additional, maybe incentive is the wrong word, but it's much more on their focus at this point. They are looking at the workforce. They're looking at the fact that China has been retaliating against the U.S. in their own way. So this is, I guess, where the trade war comes in. So it makes it difficult to do business with them. There are other less apparent issues about doing business in China where maybe clearing goods through customs may become more difficult. So that is another area that they're looking at. And actually, I go to China quite a bit to help clients on these issues. And over the past year or so, I have had discussions with them kind of off the record. And I was expecting much more of a negative take on the trade policy from the U.S. And the opposite was true, actually, which was very eye-opening for me. In essence, one of the terms that somebody quoted to me is that President Trump is good for Chinese people. And that was a bit of an eye-opener for me. And there are various reasons for that. I have to be careful here how much into detail I go, but there certainly are seeing some changes and hoping that both sides come to an agreement, and that agreement could be beneficial to both sides. So the opening of that dialogue is, I think, being favorably seen by certain, not necessarily industry sectors, but certain individuals over there. Obviously, there are some companies that are not doing as well because of this stance by the administration, but it's opening up the dialogue for sure.
Good.
Well, we've been in this country for the last 25 years. So we have seen regulations come and regulations go. We have seen taxes increase, and we have seen taxes get lowered. So we hope that the lowering of the tax is permanent. We definitely hope that. And we also hope that, the regulations that have been taken away, the deregulation is also permanent. But the main reason we are here, again, is the size of the market, the workforce, the talent pool and the workforce that we can get out here. So those are the drivers for which we are here. So again, going back to the auto sector, our auto sector has always been highly, highly regulated, and there's very little, I think, commerce can do to deregulate automotive from the safety standpoint. That's in the hands of NHTSA for most part, right? But to play in that market, I mean, this is, again, the biggest market in the world, and you got a great workforce that we have in Michigan, and for us, investing in that was really what we were looking for.
Good. Thank you. The one thing I would say, what is so gratifying about being part of the SelectUSA team is it really is a, one-stop shop in terms of, while commerce may not be able to control the regulatory structure in the automotive sector, the one thing that we can do is ensure that NHTSA and others are interacting with those investors that are looking to expand, and often invite our other agencies to discussions like the ones that we're having today. So that's great. Just building on this, so we talk about the federal level perspective, but we also have the states and the local outreach and their policies and permitting. Can you walk us through what you've experienced perhaps on a variety of fronts?
Yeah, sure. So I think states have been very good about assisting with things like environmental permitting. So if you're out there trying to build a factory, you need to realize that the state has specific rules and laws about how much emissions you have, about how much capacity that you're storing in terms of waste conservation. There's a multitude of different things that you just don't know, right, when you're coming into the country. And I think states have, especially in Ohio, I can speak to that case specifically, where you have the director of the EPA in Ohio working in tandem with the EPA folks and officials in DC, sitting down with your general counsel, sitting down with your government relations folks, and literally walking you through and saying, okay, to get this filed, you're going to need to do X, Y, and Z. This might come up, and you might get opposition here, but here's your 8-month window and what we're going to try to do, and we're going to try to make that 6 months. Now, for those that have operated all over the world in different countries, not every government's like that. You might file something and you don't hear back, or you might invest $100 million and all of a sudden they shut you down. That happens in the real world. Luckily, I think the environment, particularly under the administration currently, has set a tone where if you're going to invest and you're going to create jobs, that these kind of fundamental regulatory bodies at state level will actively come to the table and work with you about finding a solution to get something done. And that doesn't mean they're going to bypass current laws or try to, squeeze you in under, a condensed kind of manufacturing base. Not at all. Just that they're coming to the table, and I found that particularly helpful in Ohio. The other thing I'll mention is workforce, which is, everybody talks about it. It's that one statement you hear at conferences like this where no one really knows what you mean. Here's what I mean. Recruiting. States are very good at helping you recruit. If you need to get the right people into the door, they'll host job fairs for you and they'll pay for them. They'll do radio ads and they'll pay for them. They'll do all of these great things where you don't feel like you're posting an ad on Indeed.com or LinkedIn and hoping that you can hire the right people. They'll take an active role, work with community colleges. This is real. This is real stuff. So I think on those two levels, I've actually seen the state's been fantastic.
Just from our point of view, the current administration and the new tax regulations and legislation that came in were a driver behind the timing of us entering the US market, which was very helpful for us. Regulations, we didn't have much trouble with the federal legislation and regulation. Most of our issues came about from the state and more the counties and the cities. So it delves down that far, and I had our first board meeting back in Australia a couple of weeks ago, and they asked me about the US, and I said, well, you can identify it this way. You got one country with 50 countries within that, and then another 20 or 30 countries within those 50 countries, because everyone's off doing their own thing. So from our point of view, coming from the Australian system where everything's pretty consistent amongst all the states, coming into this environment where the regulations and the legislative environment is left up to those individual states, that's been the biggest challenge for us to understand all of that. Now, we've fought through that. We've got through a lot of it, and like Samir said, you do get a lot of assistance when you have the right people. So engaging Enterprise Florida in our process was a key driver in making sure that we were able to overcome those and have the right people, decision makers, in the room at the right time. So our industry is heavily regulated. As with the automotive industry, the environment is king, and we need to make sure that we protect the environment at all costs. So everyone's eyes are on the waste industry in relation to when we collect it, where does it go? Is it a licensed facility? When we operate landfills, what's our life cycle? What's our 70-year plan after that landfill closes? How are we going to continue to protect the environment? And then you've got all the new systems and processes that come in play with waste-to-energy facilities and all that new technology that is better for the environment. So all of those regulations need to evolve with our industry. And we work very closely with the Australian government, the New Zealand government, and we'll do exactly the same here and put our point across in relation to how we see our industry going forward. But labour, that's the biggest issue we have at the moment, and that comes down to the fact that in Florida, where we're headquartered and kicked off our business, we've effectively got zero unemployment. You've only got the people that are wanting to work, that are working. Everyone else that is unemployed because they want to be unemployed. And that is a big challenge, especially with your labour that's not highly educated. You've got truck drivers, and there's a truck driver shortage in the whole of the US. So we've got to bring those people on. And one of the challenges we face is our Australian history. Even though our insurance is pretty well zero, we're a very safe organisation. We self-insure in Australia. That counts for nothing here. So every driver that we bring on has this criteria that we have to apply that our competitors don't. So it costs us a lot more to engage these guys and make sure that they're employed for the right reasons. So labour is probably our number one issue in getting them through the door and then going to retain them. So.
Just expanding on that, so over 400,000 new manufacturing jobs in the United States over the last couple of years. We are indeed, as evidenced by that tremendous growth, a country that makes things, and that's been our history, but it's also our future. And all of you are contributing to our manufacturing base in one way or another. If we could just reflect on your experiences in manufacturing and some of the challenges that you've encountered, and what are some of the opportunities that perhaps some in the audience may want to focus on in terms of courting your next investment.
Yeah. I'll start on that one, because we're about to, later this year, early next year, we're going to have a manufacturing facility here in the US. We're very unique in our field, in the world, in that we manufacture our own trucks. So we buy the cab chassis from Mack, and then the body that goes on the back of that truck is manufactured in-house. So we do that in Australia. We're going to do that here as well. We manufacture all of our bins and compactors and this pulp master system that it's going to evolve. So manufacturing is going to be a key part to us. So I've got to get my head around how we're going to be successful and get the right people. Again, it comes back to staffing in my world. So manufacturing is something that I can talk about the Australian system and what we do there, but the US system, I'm about to embark on that next challenge shortly. So I'll leave it up to the other guys to talk about the manufacturing here.
Good.
So I think, so 5 years ago we started in Detroit with about 6 people. Today we are at about 500. So that is the manufacturing job growth that we have seen within Mahindra Group in Michigan. Now, if things go according to plan, I would expect that the total headcount could be as much as 2,000 or so in the next 3 years. So the plans are pretty aggressive. The challenge that we have is basically to find the right people when you're growing that fast, when your headcount is increasing that much. So in such a short time, I think the challenge is finding the right people to fill the right positions. So for that, I think what we have also done is job training programs. We have instituted that. We definitely work with the universities. We work with, so again, it all boils down to partnerships. Samir was just talking about partnering with the local economic development agency. In our case, we partnered with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, MEDC.
Sure.
And so we have done, and they've done a tremendous job for us. They've given us a tremendous amount of incentives, training grants, training programs that have been offered to us, and we have taken advantage of that. So effectively, I think we got incentives of over $1 million, and all of it is related to people and headcount and manpower and human power development.
The one thing, if I might add, I think one of the major challenges I've seen in manufacturing today is a lot of the stuff is old. You're acquiring a brownfield asset, something that hasn't been invested in or capitalized in a material way. Think about old pipes, old kind of mills. This is real, okay? So when you're coming into the country, you're like, okay, I want to start a tire manufacturing business. So you go and you buy this mill, and you realize that you have a few challenges. One is you got to put all this money in to fix everything and get it modernized, and then two, you need to keep enough of the old staff there so you have people that know where the light switches are. But at the same time, you need to hire people. But the people that you're hiring forgot how to use these. So it's a tricky way to kind of come up that curve. But there's so many opportunities to do it. There's so many mills around the country right now that are in need of assistance, whether you can call them distressed or in need of capital. I think it's a wonderful time for joint ventures. And so really, I think it's about fixing what's been, for lack of a better word, what hasn't been given much attention. And two is keeping the existing workforce, but funneling in new workforce that can all kind of mesh and work together. It's just like running any business. But manufacturing is a wonderful challenge for a lot of amazing companies like the ones sitting here today. And those that are taking it on, I think are doing a great job.
I like to add to that because from our perspective, we have seen exactly that same problem. So clients that are currently sourcing from overseas, China, I'll give an example, are more than willing to bring production here. They're importer clients, and they're willing to give U.S. mills in this situation that I'm thinking about is involving aluminum industry. They're willing to buy from U.S. mills for decades if the U.S. mills can change or upgrade their lines. And they haven't been able to do it. They haven't had the capital to do it. And this is an opportunity for, in our view, for investment and upgrading, because once that happens, these clients will move here and they will source domestically. It's much cheaper for them to do that than they're having to pay for freight, to have the uncertainty to deal with changing, evolving Chinese regulations. So they would certainly entertain it. The other area I think Darrell touched on was labor. And that has been an issue for some clients as well, and it's, I guess, to some extent, a good problem to have because of the unemployment that is so low. Finding the skilled labor in certain parts of the country to handle some of that demand.
Good. Just building off of the labor and the workforce challenges, the administration and the White House has led the Workforce Council. That's co-chaired by Ivanka Trump and Secretary Ross, and we'll hear from Ivanka tomorrow. That Workforce Council is comprised of state governors, business leaders, and of course the federal government. And we're really examining concrete actions that we can take over a short period of time. In reflecting on this high-level process, are there examples that you can point to that really, just were so impactful for you in a state? You mentioned the community colleges, their ability to respond quickly. Are there examples that you'd like to share that really just, blew your socks away or encourage you to make that next leap?
Yeah. I'll defer to you.
Okay. Again, I mean, when we work with the universities, and that is with the help of the state, and when we work with them and when we get those kind of tremendous talent, the skill, it just kind of motivates you into saying, okay, we have come to the right place. Now, how do we kind of continue this trajectory of investment, growth, and more recruitment? Okay. And that is when you really see how the dedicated workforce, that they're all pulling together. So that is exactly what we've seen. And that has been our experience. And so from my perspective is basically we can't wait to invest more. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to sell the US here. I mean, that's not,
that's
well,
all right.
that is,
We'll take that.
we are doing that, but I don't want to be in your face on that. But truly, I mean, that is really when we go and try to recruit, and that is really the kind of the effect that we have. It's definitely very motivating.
Thank you. Any other examples?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before. I think the one thing is that these state programs have really good recruiting arms, right? And so you're given a person that will help you create job descriptions, have job fairs, do all those things. So I think that's really good. But it's not the whole game. And I'll give you an example. I think, and Dilip brought up a good point, the university and college networks are key. So a really exciting area of the country right now is a research triangle in North Carolina, right outside of Raleigh. If you start a company there, you'll be very happy for a lot of reasons. One is wages are relatively low. It's becoming a new OEM type auto supplier state. And you're in this heart where there's this constant stream of students coming out of two-year technical programs and community college programs and even universities at the engineering level that can help you and build your business, where it's in your backyard. So I would encourage, if you're looking at opportunities, to consider not just the support of those individual counties and states, but look at where you're doing it, right? If you're doing it in the center of 22 community colleges around you, you're going to feel comfortable. So it's always a business decision as well.
Quality of place initiatives, throughout the U.S. As a former state economic developer myself, we were once told by a company, my workforce first chooses where they want to live, and then where they want to play, and then where they want to work, in that order. If you comment on some of that quality of place, it's just not about the incentives that you're given, but you want to retain your workforce, and you want to have that individual that you expend tremendous resources to train in your company's practices to stay with you. Can you talk about successful examples of community efforts and state and local efforts on that front? So why don't we start here with Mark?
Well, I can give an example from one of our clients' perspectives. It's a Japanese manufacturer of airbag components, and they decided to come to Kentucky because of the incentives the state offered them. It was also the proximity to auto manufacturers that happened to be in the area. So you had U.S. and also other Japanese car manufacturers, very, very close proximity. They had a good labor force, educated labor force that they could draw upon, and the tax incentives to set up the facilities there. So I don't know their personal, the details of those reasons, but that's the impression I had from visiting those plants and from hearing directly from the Japanese management on why they settled for that particular place.
So with Mahindras, we have over 30 locations across the U.S. I mean, we have right from New York to California, and we have in Iowa, and then also in Texas. So we cover the length and breadth of this country. So for us, of course, the reason we land up in a certain place is probably because of incentives or probably because of opportunities there. But not once have we ever come across a situation where we have had problems recruiting people there or sending people there or having to close down a facility because living conditions were poor. I mean, it's always been it's always been great for people to live there, work there, and the communities that they are in, they belong in, are always uplifting for them. And so Mahindra has had a wonderful experience from that perspective.
I think visas are always an issue. If you're an inbound investor and you need to bring in your experienced staff to come in and help teach people how to use specific polymer injection equipment or specific casters, and you have facilities in Germany and Mexico and India, and you want to bring someone in for a year just to teach people, government can be a little difficult. They have these things called RFEs, requests for more evidence. They're like, give me more evidence. Why do you need to come into the US? And it can be challenging. You're running a business. And the people that will help you the most are your senators and your congressmen. I had a situation where a client needed to get 40 workers from Germany into the US and to stabilize. They called it stabilizing an asset. We called up their senator and said, sir, we need to get these 40 people in. We're not asking you to approve the visas. We're not asking you to do that. But just make sure that they're considered with deliberate attention, right? There's ways to phrase things. And he said, sure, I'll do that. Called up USCIS, called up Homeland, and said, guys, get them interviews. This is an important company. They're trying to do some great things in my state. And instead of a 3-month, 4-month wait, it took 20 days. So don't forget to use these people. There's so many people around you that can help you. You just have to know how to navigate it and how to do it. But I think visas are always going to be an issue, no matter what administration it is. But you need to find your allies that understand what your goals are. And if your goal is to invest and hire, you'll always have allies.
I can talk to that on a personal level. The US consulate in Australia got my initial visa done in 20 days to get us over here to commence operations. So we had a lot of support in relation to that. I'm going through a process right now. My immigration attorney, Simone's here, and we're actually going through that right now for my permanent residency. Mm-hmm. And that's ended up being a 12-month process just to get where we are at the moment. So, but in relation to the immigration status, I think it's important that you have strong policies and you have strong legislation around it, but there has to be sensibility around why the people are coming and give that selection criteria the right process so that you can get these short-term people in to establish your business. Because without those people, it's going to take you twice as long to start paying the taxes to the government that you want to, because you haven't got that experience there, and it takes time to develop that experience. So that's probably where I'll leave that one.
You know, it strikes me, I mean, you're all global companies or representing, multinational companies. They're making investments all over the world, and you're making it for different reasons. The experience that you have, I think it was apparent to me in meeting with some of the foreign delegations here today that were led by the governments. They said, gosh, well, we're thinking about creating a select, fill in the blank. We love, SelectUSA so much. And, it led me to ask this question. In your experiences with these other global partners or competitors or, like-minded trading partners, how would you compare the experience that you've had here in expanding, either through working with a state economic development corporation or alongside SelectUSA, versus that other experience? And what can we take away from that? What candid advice would you have for the states in the room, as well as the federal partners here in the U.S.? Maybe start with, Mark.
I think, and I'd like to touch also on what Samir said, the connections with within the government, with local officials, with local government officials have been very important. And I think this has been a major benefit for our clients, both the domestic companies doing business overseas and in foreign companies as well that come here to invest and set up facilities. Establishing those local ties with their members of Congress, the local politicians, have been tremendously helpful for them. So we would definitely encourage that. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you don't see everywhere around the world. I mean, it is a much more transparent system here. It's not, I mean, obviously connections and knowing people do play a part, but maybe not to some extent to the level that they may play a part overseas in different countries. So here it is much more transparent. You do have that access, and I would encourage companies to take advantage of it. Certainly our clients have taken advantage of it through lobbying efforts, through meetings on the federal level, on the state level, and within the administration as well.
Thank you, Mark.
So Ian, I mean, first of all, that was a loaded question. So instead of giving specific examples, I think let me kind of share with you what a company looks for when we are looking for a partner like SelectUSA.
Sure.
I think the first thing is we want transparency. In any country that we want to invest in, we just want to make sure that there is a lot of transparency and it's corruption-free. I mean, all those things are very important. The second is accessibility. So we need to reach people, we need to talk to people, we need to develop partnerships. So that ability to develop partnerships and that ability to reach out to people who control many of those, many of the approval processes. I mean, that is important. I mean, not that we are looking for a special treatment, but we just need to state our case. And that accessibility goes all the way, at least in the US, what I've seen is it goes all the way to a congressional delegation. So you can reach out to a state senator, you can reach out to the state congressman or congresswoman, and state your case. And when I say state your case, I mean, you're really telling your story as to why that investment is going to be great for that state. And like Samir said, you got an ally. Now they listen to you, they understand you, and that's the other thing that a company looks for. Then very importantly, there's some sort of certainty. Okay, so we don't want to kind of like, again, I mean, Samir touched on it, which is we don't want to submit an application for some approval process and wait for 6 months, 8 months, and we don't know what is happening. Now, sometimes, and I have encountered the situation where the authorities tell you that it's going to take 3 months for the approval process, and 6 months down the road, you're still waiting for it. Now, that is the worst case, because you have probably gone back to your board of directors and you have basically said, oh, we're going to get approval in 3 months. Surely 4 months, everything would be done. So you made that promise, and nothing happened 6 months later. It's not the government that looks like a fool. It's you who looks like a fool in front of your board. So I think those are some of the things that we look for. And what we have found here with SelectUSA is exactly all that.
Thank you. Anything else to add to?
I suppose from our perspective, coming over to the US market, we don't know what we don't know. And what SelectUSA was able to do for us was open those doors. It was able to meet with the delegation from Florida and get all those doors open. Through that, we've got great contacts now in LA through the guys from LA, Texas, and all the other markets. I was lucky enough to meet with the Lieutenant Governor a couple of years ago. They're going to assist us enter their state with the Pulp Master system, because it's a very exciting sort of process that they want to reduce the amount of food waste going to landfill, and this achieves that for them. They've got targets they've got to achieve. We're able to provide a solution that's not available in this country at the moment. So SelectUSA has been fantastic in that respect of allowing us to meet with the appropriate people we need to meet with on a regular basis. Can pick up the phone, send an email, and if they don't know the answer, they'll find the answer for us and put us in touch with the right people.
Thank you, Darrell.
So if I can add
please.
one more thing, I mean, and actually because you had asked such a
Broad.
powerful, loaded question. I think the other thing is basically like we talked about rules and regulations. Transparent rules and regulations that are simple to understand, simple to follow through. Yep. And I have had an experience, and I need to share this experience, where you go for an environmental permit, and the person says, well, you're going to get this environmental permit. And after sitting on it for 2 months, they say, you're going to get this environmental permit when you get your water permit. You go to the water permit, and they say, well, gee, I mean, you're not going to get your water permit unless you have a drainage permit. And then you go to the drainage permit, and then they say, but then where's your environmental permit? We can't give you a drainage permit without an environmental permit. So you're back full circle. So, I mean, these are things that, you know, you don't want to encounter, particularly as an investor. The last thing you want to encounter, these kind of headaches. So I think, again, going back, we have not encountered any of these kind of situations anywhere in the U.S. And as I said, we have more than 30 locations here.
I grew up in the semiconductor industry, so I was in that industry for quite some time, and we talked a little bit about the world-class research universities, the innovation environment here. I mean, you are all innovative companies. You're looking to, invest not only in manufacturing but R&D. Can you talk a little bit about, what your future outlook here is on the innovation side? What's attractive to you? What sectors are taking off that you are looking for, maybe not investing in or committing R&D dollars to tomorrow, but over the next 3 to 5 years, what should folks be thinking about as they're developing their long-term plans in the audience? So why don't we start with Mark on the innovation?
Well, I think from our perspective, it has been generally manufacturing. That's we're seeing a focus on bringing those jobs back here, yep. And that goes across various industries. So you have I mentioned aluminum before, steel, those industries in particular. I think that as long as the mills keep upgrading, those investments will come back, those jobs will come back here. But also on more basic, commodity levels as well. It's not, what we're seeing is it's not as economical to produce overseas as it used to be necessarily. I mean, those places, in Japan was a source in maybe the 70s, 80s. Then you had, Korea come into play, China now, but it's becoming more and more expensive to make products in China as well. So our clients are definitely taking a look at the opportunities here across different industry sectors.
Good. Thoughts?
So absolutely. U.S. has always been a cradle of innovation. And if you really think about it, every 25 years, U.S. has completely overhauled the economic backbone of the country. In the 50s, it was automotive manufacturing. In the 70s, it was computers. In the 90s, it was internet. Okay, where are we today? Okay, we are in advanced manufacturing, robotics. We are in automated driving. We are in electric cars. That is kind of the direction that this economy is moving towards. So if you want to be in the forefront of innovative technologies, an innovative economy, U.S. is really the place. It is the frontier for that kind of innovation.
Yeah, I think it's really, for me, I can't speak personally, but I'm a little cautious on the word innovation. I think right now people are rebuilding. They're trying to find business models that work and that are profitable. What's the point of innovating if you're not profitable? So that's the way I look at it. But look, I mean, pharmaceuticals, technology, AI, IT, OT, this is all great stuff. And I wish I knew more about it, but I'll leave it at that.
Darrell.
Innovation's a big thing in our industry. There's a lot of automation happening through recycling, and rather than have 16 people on a line sorting those plastics and glass and everything out, we now have robots or blowers and all sorts of magical stuff that happens there. But innovation in the collection side is key. It's all about safety. So safety innovations for our drivers to make sure that they don't run a person over, they don't cause an injury, cause damage to a person's property. So our vehicles are all evolving with the support of companies like Volvo in relation to identifying that that's a person in front of our truck. I need to apply the brake. So there's a lot of innovation that then stems into the real world. And so our industry is right for it, and we'll be bringing a lot of innovation over the course of the next 2 years as a business ourselves. So yeah, very important facet.
Well, thank you, Darrell. And I know we have to wrap up here in a few minutes, but I want to leave you with the opportunity to provide any last words of wisdom or advice to the group gathered here today. So let's start with Mark.
Well, I think the landscape has been changing quite a bit during the last couple of years, and I think the trade policies have led to kind of a reevaluation of investment in the U.S. and maybe moving production back into the U.S. We're certainly seeing that, and our clients are not taking it very lightly. They're taking a careful look at bringing jobs back here. So we certainly see that continuing, and I think over the next couple of years, we were hoping that some of these agreements with foreign countries are reached and are beneficial to both sides.
Thank you.
So, contrary to popular perception, at present, U.S. is the bastion of free trade and liberal investment policies. So there is no other country in the world that you are going to come across that where the ability to invest, the ability to grow, and the ability to prosper is completely unhindered. So that would be my closing thought.
Yep.
I'd just say trade and investment are now tied more closely together than they've ever been. I encourage you to look at it as an opportunity.
Darrell?
I think we've got to make sure that the administration hears what we're saying and understands that there's a lot of money to come into this country. We need to make sure that it's invested in the right spaces and that we're there supporting US jobs at the end of the day. That's what we're all here for. It's to bring more jobs into this market.
Well, thank you for your candid comments, your advice, and most importantly, thank you for your investment and your commitment to the future of manufacturing and the services industry here in the United States. If I could get a big round of applause for these investors, incredible advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.